So, if you want to play Dungeons and Dragons or D&D, maybe that group of friends you can barely tolerate nagged you to. Maybe you watch Stranger Things or The Simpsons and thought, wow, I want to do what those unlikable nerds are doing. Or maybe you were just watching something like Critical Role featuring Cowboy Policeman and were thinking, yeah, that looks fun. So you decide to look into some tutorials and find two things. Very quick tutorials that teach you nothing except what D&D is, or 3-hour epics that teach you mechanics and skills that I've really never used in my about 6 months of playing D&D in multiple games. So I'm going to be talking about the very basics. What is D&D? Skill checks, combat, spell casting, and I'll talk briefly about character creation. So Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game or TTRPG. It is played using the power of imagination and some nerdy looking dice, some nerdy looking paper, a nerdy looking map, and some other stuff that make you look like the nerd you are. You play as a character in the world of D&D, usually set in the Forgotten Realms, a high fantasy world. This can be anyone from a heroic knight, a criminal rogue, or a wise wizard. Every game has a dungeon master. This is the guy running everything. They control enemies, non-playable characters, basically everyone who isn't a player. They describe environments and locations to players. D&D usually follows a cycle. First, the Dungeon Master, or DM from here on out, describes the environment. Then the players will decide upon a course of action, whether to attack something or whatever. The DM then will describe the results and the resulting environment. The character you play is represented by a character sheet. At the top are 6 base stats: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. While all of these stats may seem obvious, some are a bit more nuanced than that. Strength, in this case, kind of contradicts my point. It affects combat and generally makes you more athletic. Dexterity is how well you move, and this can mean anything from just being really fast, but it can also be stealth or being acrobatic. Constitution, on the surface, you may think, oh, that just affects how many hits I can take. Well, yes, that is true. It's not the only thing Constitution does. It's sort of a resilience stat. Stuff like high pain tolerance, holding your breath, being able to eat one of those disgusting mini tomatoes, you know the kind, without like vomiting, and that sort of thing. Intelligence is exactly how it sounds. You know crap. This stat lets you recall facts about locations, objects, and more. Wisdom is sort of a common sense stat. You can become more in tune to your surroundings. You're able to perceive. It also allows you to survive in the wilderness. Charisma affects social interaction. This can be persuading a guard to let you in to a castle, performing as a jester for a king, or even threatening a stray goblin for information on his leader. D&D is a game where you can do anything you like. It's not a video game or a strategy board game where there's a set of rules and limited actions you can take. This doesn't mean that everything you will do will be successful. Not always, but often the DM will ask you to make a skill check. A skill check is a roll made by a player with a d20, a 20-sided die. A d6 is a 6-sided die. You get the gist. To make a skill check, roll a d20 and add the relevant modifier. In order to succeed with the roll with modifiers, the roll must be larger than the difficulty class, or DC. You add the modifier even if you are not proficient. This only applies in 5th edition. There are 18 skills you can roll from, and these are based on your stats. If you're proficient in a skill, it increases the modifier. I'm not going to explain all the skills, but I will explain the ones that cause the most arguments and confusion at tables. Arcana is just knowledge of magic. You're able to identify where magic is and identify spells depending on your DM's rules. Athletics is your ability to do anything that can be considered a sport. For example, lifting something large and heavy would probably be an athletics check. Kicking a door down is not a sport, I checked, so that would probably just be a strength check. History isn't just knowledge of historical events, it's knowledge of locations and people. For example, you may know the king of a castle, or maybe know information about a famous rogue. Insight is seeing if somebody is lying. That's it. You also have saving throws, which you only add modifiers for saving throws if you are proficient in said saving throw. A saving throw is not like a skill check. You don't roll it when you're trying to do something, you roll it when someone is trying to do something against you. The world of Dungeons and Dragons is dangerous. It is filled with threats such as dungeons and dragons. Like this. When combat starts, your DM will ask you to do the thing you see all the nerds in the shows do. Roll initiative. You roll a d20 and add your dexterity modifier. Whoever gets the highest number goes first. In combat, you have two stats that dictate how alive you are. Armor class, or AC, and health points, or HP. AC dictates how high your opponent will have to roll to hit you. AC is determined by your dexterity and or armor. Chain and plate armor will completely undermine your dex stat in AC, but leather will not. You also have health points, which if they reach 0, you are knocked down and must roll death saves. When you have to roll death saves, you roll a d20 every turn from the turn you get knocked down. If you get above 10, it's a success. If you get a 10 or below, it counts as a failure. A 20 will get you 2 successes, and a 1 will count as 2 failures. Your benevolent party members can also lend a hand. If they succeed on a DC 10 medicine check, you will be knocked. If they succeed, the knockdown player must roll a 4-sided die, and that will determine how many hours it will take the player to regain consciousness. You can do 5 things on a turn independently of each other: movement, action, bonus action, interaction, and reaction. You very likely won't be doing all of these every turn, but they are all independent from one another. So you can do all 5 of them in one turn, theoretically. Actions. You will probably take one of these every turn. These are things like casting spells and attacking. I will get into spells later, but now I will talk about attacking. I'm playing as Morrigar, and I would like to attack this goblin with my Great Axe. First, I roll against the goblin's AC. Let's say I got a 10. Now I add my proficient fire modifier and strength modifier of 5, which adds to 15. This is above the goblin's AC of 13. Now I roll damage. Let's say I got 11. I add my plus 3 strength modifier, and now I have 14 damage. You can also dash as an action, which doubles your movement speed at the cost of an attack or something else. You can also disengage, which prevents enemy reaction attacks, which I will talk about later. Bonus action. These are usually dictated by your class. However, there's one thing that's universal: attacking with a weapon in your offhand. This only works if both weapons have the light property. You also cannot add weapon proficiency to the weapon in your offhand unless you have a specific trait that lets you do so. You can also perform an interaction. This is you interacting with the world. Big shocker, I know. This is stuff like flipping a switch or pressing a button. Finally, I come back to reaction. This is taken with specific spells and when an enemy moves out of your melee radius without taking the disengage action. Now it's time to talk about spellcasting. In D&D, many classes have spells. There are 2 types of spells: cantrips and leveled. Cantrips can be casted on a whim and without consequence. Then there are leveled spells. Each leveled spell has a level from 1 through 9. When you cast a leveled spell, you have to mark off that level's specific spell slot. You can have multiple for each level. You get access to more spells as you level. I'm going to cover character creation, but all I'm going to do is describe the more popular classes in the player's handbook. At this point, I would highly recommend using something like D&D Beyond for your character creation. First, we have the Barbarian, who have high health and armor class. They usually work best with the two-handed great weapons. They can also enter a rage, which gives them much better damage. Then we have Bards. They are a spellcaster with a lute and instruments of sorts. Somehow, they are an all-rounder class. You can specialize them into damage or support or whatever you like. You also have clerics, who are divine and get their spellcasting power from literal gods of the realm. Fun! You also got fighter, who need an IQ of at least 170 to figure out what they do. They have proficiency in simple and martial weapons, and also get a bunch of attacks per action. You also have monks, who specialize in unarmed combat and have abilities that can help that. They specialize in unarmed combat, but you do not always need to be unarmed while you are doing combat. You also have paladins, who are fighters, but they derive their powers from the gods. And yes, you can reclaim the Holy Land as these guys. You also have ranger, who not only does well with bows, but is a master of the environment and terrain. They can also cast a few spells. You also have a rogue, who is best when you play sneakily, and you also have access to a few martial weapons. Lastly, you have wizard, which lets you cast the most spells. It's sort of the main spellcaster of the D&D class roster. I didn't cover everything in this guide. I went over everything you would absolutely fundamentally need to know to join a table and Dungeons and Dragons. If you want to know more about a specific class, I would recommend watching your video in the class guide series from the YouTube channel Don't Stop Thinking. I always feels like my videos have abrupt endings, so let's not do it this time. Dungeons and Dragons is a fun role-playing game. It's good fun when played with family, friends, or even complete strangers. And the game houses some of the most hilarious and memorable moments of my life. I hope this guide will help you make some of those memories as well.